Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with part 2 of A World Journey, The Great Pyramid, Place of Initiation, by the Imperator AMORC. An article from Rosicrucian Digest, Volume 32, Number 2, February 1954. The Thought of the Month, The Great Pyramid, Place of Initiation, by the Imperator AMORC. This article is the second of a series being written by the Imperator after his return from a world journey in behalf of the Rosicrucian Order. Editor. In our times, we are spectators of the renewed vicious conflict between the will of the people and the state. Shall the state reflect the will of man and serve him, or shall it become a political robot which, as an entity, shall enslave the individual? Many governments of the world today are but oligarchies. A few speak for the many, but the words they utter do not express the thoughts or ideals of the multitude. Though France is included among the democracies, and her government has not yet descended to the category of an oligarchy, the majority of our citizens have lost confidence in their government, proclaim plans for public welfare and social and economic improvement, lack the support of the laboring classes. Due to the internal weakness whereby different administrations have not been able to fulfill their promises, the average citizen has become suspicious of all official proclamations for the future. As a consequence of this lack of public interest, each administration has found itself seriously handicapped in attaining its ends. Its subsequent failures have seemed to confirm in the minds of the working classes, though often without justification, their suspicions as to the sincerity of the administration. The series of paralyzing strikes which France in particular has experienced since the last war are the result of this lack of public confidence in government. It was our misfortune to be among the victims of these circumstances during the last strike, which existed on almost a national level. Having arrived in Paris for our conferences with the Grand Secretary of the AMORC, we are confronted with suspicion of air, rail, metro, and bus transportation, as well as almost a complete cessation of telephone, telegraph, and postal service. One was impressed with the psychological import of such a strike. It was the equivalent of the peoples reassuring themselves that they were the state, that the power over its welfare was still vested in their hands. The crippling effect on all public service, even though inconveniencing the individual as well as the government, gave the individual the satisfaction of knowing that he was the important factor in efficient government. Though conditions in France had made it impossible for us to address an assembly of members in Paris as planned, we did have conferences of importance with the Grand Secretary of the AMORC in France at Villeneuve-Saint-Georges. As our jet plane, the Comet, shot southward to Cairo at a velocity of nearly 500 miles an hour, we recalled with satisfaction the great expansion being made by the AMORC in France, necessitating the construction of new administration facilities. The modern pavement ended. There before us began the hot sands of the desert plateau. It was like a symbolic transition from our modern century to an era of 30 centuries ago. The Vesta, even if seen many times before, never fails to enthrall one, and it especially did so on this occasion. The summer sun beating upon the desert caused the air to shimmer with heat waves, giving the whole the appearance of a mirage. Slowly our eyes ascended from the massive base to the flat apex above the plateau, the Great Pyramid of Giza, truly one of the wonders of the world. The humble and the great since the time of its building have stood with awe or reverence before it, just as we did. Whether one is ignorant of its history or skeptical of its avowed traditional romantic purposes, he cannot fail to have admiration for its builders. The spectator gazes upon the greatest of all structures of the ancient world, and one that would tax the skill and facilities of our age. Further, the recondite method by which its construction was achieved stimulates the imagination. One tries to visualize its ancient builders laboring upon this same plateau, so little changed by the vicissitudes of time. This was August 19th, 1953. According to those who interpret the symbolism of the mathematical proportions of this huge edifice, it was an event of importance. The period of 24 hours between midnight of August 19th and midnight of August 20th was the beginning of the fulfilling of a prophecy. The Great Pyramid has long been adjudged by the adherents to the theory as a message in stone, a silent testimony of events which was to affect the welfare of mankind. These prophecies began some 2,000 years ago and reached their climax with this date. The occasion of our visit was not the commemoration of this world-renowned prophetic date, though once before on a date of similar importance, September 16, 1936, Rosicrucian AMORC officers were present. The Rosicrucians had assembled at this time from throughout Egypt and several other lands to participate in an age-old ceremony to be held within the very heart of this memorable monument of antiquity. That it was the day when millions of students of history, esoteric philosophy, and mysticism should have this date in mind, made it an event of special significance for an appreciation of the ceremony in which the Rosicrucians, who were assembled before the base of Cheops pyramid, were to participate. It is necessary to first recall something of the history of this mysterious and majestic edifice. The pyramids of Giza, a few miles from Cairo, and lying high above the Nile, of which the Great Pyramid is the largest, are but a few of many. There is one whole age in Egyptian history known as the Pyramid Age. This period lasted from 3000 BC to 2500 BC, or 500 years. The pyramids constructed during these 5 centuries stretched southward along the Nile some 60 miles. Each was the tomb or burial place of a king or pharaoh, and the inscriptions found upon its walls and inner chambers related the life and times of the deceased. Also, there was inscribed liturgies from the Book of the Dead or what was expected of the afterlife. In fact, the translations of such inscriptions are referred to as the pyramid texts, consisting a fundamental part of the recorded history of Egypt. Purpose and skill. The incentive for the building of these massive structures sprang from the religious beliefs of their builders. The concept of immortality, life after death, and the consequent desire to preserve the body and the deceased one's personal treasures or belongings for the next world was the prime motive, long before the construction of the first pyramid and stone structure. By King Zoser, the pharaohs and nobles had built tombs or mastabas for themselves out of mud brick. These were rectangular in shape and low in height. Beneath was a pit or sepulchre chamber and a chapel within the mud brick rectangle, where devotions were held to the departed. Early after his ascension, each pharaoh began to plan and construct his tomb. Eventually, after Zoser, the pyramids were made more pretentious and obviously intended as permanent tombs for the pharaohs. In all of them was found either the mummified body of the king or the evidence that it had been interred there. When the body was missing, it was because ancient tomb robbers had stolen it to remove the costly jewelry with which it was often adorned. The Great Pyramid is unique in many ways. First, there is no indication that a huge stone sarcophagus or coffin in the king's chamber actually contained the body of a king. There are no inscriptions upon it from antiquity, nor may any be found elsewhere in the pyramid. There is not even a cover for the massive sarcophagus, and none for it has been found. In fact, the king's chamber is strikingly austere in its plainness in comparison to the sepulchre chambers of other pyramids. Numerous historians, such as Herodotus, Pliny, Diodorus, Strabo, and Alexander, have left impressive accounts about the Great Pyramid. To these must be added the conclusions of modern archaeologists and Egyptologists who are by no means in accord. It would appear that the building of the Great Pyramid began in the 4th dynasty, in 2900 BC, according to the account of Herodotus, Greek historian of the 5th century BC. It was built during the reign of Khufu, or Cheops, and it required 100,000 men working constantly for a period of 20 years to complete it. These men were drafted by the administration to labor upon this mammoth undertaking. The extent of the project may be realized by the fact that the pyramid contains 2,300,000 blocks of granite and limestone, averaging 2.5 tons each. Some of these stones are 30 feet long, 5 feet high, and 4 feet wide. The tremendous weight resting on the bedrock above the Nile Valley. It attains a height of nearly 500 feet. It is 761.5 feet or more than 2.5 average city blocks long on all 4 sides. It contains more than 90 million cubic feet or 5 million tons of granite and limestone. There is enough stone to build a wall, 4 feet high and 1 foot thick. The distance from New York to San Francisco and halfway back. Tremendous skill with special knowledge of mechanics and related sciences was required to merely move the blocks from the quarry a few miles up the Nile onto the barges. Thence to move these huge stones up a ramp constructed for the purpose, the blocks being finally lifted into place. The block and tackle and similar devices, we presume, were unknown for lifting purposes. That ramps were used was established by the fact that the ruins of one used in the construction of an uncompleted pyramid adjacent to the Great Pyramid have been found. The excellence of the fabrication of the stone or the masonry work is indicated by huge blocks joined with less than 1/1000th of an inch error in a length of 6 feet. Stones with 16 tons of joined surfaces 35 feet square are held together with a film like cement no thicker than a hair. Originally, the entire surface was covered with a casing of finely polished limestone, which caused the whole to shimmer in the brilliant Egyptian sunlight. It seemed like a gigantic finger pointing heavenward to the divine wisdom which appeared to have inspired the builders. After all, only a century and a half before the building of the Great Pyramid, modern archaeologists admit, there is no evidence to indicate that the sciences had attained anywhere near such perfection as is employed in the construction of the Great Pyramid, nor is there any evidence of any implements by which the stone could have been quarried to such accuracy. From whence then came that knowledge? It could not have been developed in a short time. Did a strange race enter Egypt and bring with it the knowledge, or did the knowledge exist among a special group of people who intended the structure as a monument for posterity of the learning which they possessed? The lines where the casings of limestone blocks is joined together were perfectly perpendicular, all having been predetermined. This discloses a knowledge of trigonometry and higher mathematics. Numerous other factors point to the scientific knowledge possessed by the builders. The weight of the Great Pyramid in proportion to its mass is said to be relatively equal to the weight of the Earth to its size. There is also evidence that the pyramid was used for astronomical observation. Further, its mean temperature, even in the torrid days of summer, is about 68 degrees, and is said to be given the equivalent of the mean temperature of all the seas at a given depth. Of the huge sarcophagus in the King's Chamber, see photograph in the January issue of this magazine. It has been said by a modern historian that it is a most accurately shaped standard of measurement and proportions. Its sides and bottoms cubically identical with its internal space, the length of its 2 sides to its height, as a circle to its diameter. Its exterior volume just twice the dimensions of its bottom, and its whole measure a definite proportion of the chamber in which it was put when the edifice was built. We may well wonder what all such unparalleled scientific elaborations have to do with a mere tomb. That it was not intended as a tomb, but a place of initiation for a great mystery school of learning has long been an esoteric tradition. Diodorus Siculus, 1st century BC historian, relates that it was not the burial place of the pharaoh. Cheops was not buried here, but in an obscure and unknown place. The first in relatively modern times to enter the Great Pyramid was the Caliph el-Mamun. He thought that it, as did most of the other pyramids, contained a huge treasure. He made a false entrance and, upon finally entering the king's chamber, found it as it appeared today, plain, austere, and with no vestige of its real purpose in evidence. To be continued. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.